Now, in today's episode, we have a very special guest, and that guest is Paula Holland. And Paula is a mental fitness coach. She's an inspirational storyteller, also an inspirational speaker. She's an award-winning author, a watercolor artist, and she has 20 plus years of being a cancer survivor. And cancer recovery taught her to listen to the quiet, intuitive voice of her heart, rather than that terrified, naysaying voice of fear that had been running her life up until then. And as an expert in decisive change, fierce courage, and taking leaps of faith, her passion is reconnecting heart-centered women who feel trapped, overwhelmed, and exhausted, or unfulfilled in their truest self. And really, what she's wanting to do is get that life of vitality, joy, and flow back. So I'm sure you're going to be just as excited as I am to welcome Paula today. So let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Somatic Movement and Mindset podcast with me, clinical somatic educator and founder of Total Somatics, HEIDI HADLEY. The Somatic Movement and Mindset podcast has been designed to help you gain a deeper understanding to how your mind and body work. You will learn about your amazing mind and body and why over time you can feel pain, recurring injuries and poor posture. Within this podcast, I will teach you why this doesn't have to be your future or the norm for you. Would you like to learn how to reduce pain, move freely and gain a new lease of life? Let's get started.
So welcome to this episode. And as I mentioned in the bio, we've got Paula Holland joining us today. And Paula is incredible. And I just want to say a massive thank you to Paula because we've literally just finished a workshop for the Total Somatics members. And she shared so many gems that I've made quite a few notes today. So when Paula and I just start chatting naturally, I'm going to bring out some of those points and we're going to just discuss them so that you as the podcast listener here can also benefit too. And at the end, there'll be an opportunity to find out much more about Paula. So we'll share that with you. So let me just introduce you to Paula here. So thank you for joining, Paula. It's been wonderful spending this morning and your evening together.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. And I'm just honored to be here and very appreciative to have a chance to share what I'm passionate about.
Oh, fantastic. Well, would it be possible, Paula, to share a little bit about who you are and how you've come into this rewarding area of work?
Sure, I would be happy to. You mentioned in my bio that I'm a cancer survivor, and basically, as an adult, I had basically normal childhood. As an adult, I was an epitome of success. I had a good job. I took nice vacations. I wore nice clothes, and I was well respected. And my life on the surface appeared really wonderful and something that a lot of people would like. What most people didn't know is that underneath that, I was kind of a writhing ball of anxiety and stress and being afraid that I wasn't good enough. And I now realize that I was suffering from imposter syndrome. I didn't realize it then. But so most of my life, my adult life until I was 37, when I was diagnosed with cancer, was spent doing what my parents thought I should do, what my society thought I should do, what my partners thought I should do, what I thought people wanted me to do. And what was never a consideration or of any importance was what was best for me and what I needed. And cancer changed that because cancer is a wake-up call. And I woke up. I wasn't willing to spend my entire life making other people look good at the expense of myself. And so that was my turning point. And that's the point when I became a coach. I've been coaching for almost 15, maybe over 15 years, almost 15 years. And have had a very successful career, enjoying it. I've always worked with women. I spent a lot of time in the beginning of my career working with cancer patients and survivors, helping them create new lives after cancer ended and becoming happily and joyful and healthy. And more recently, my own life kind of took in 2020, and I took a big leap of faith and a risk and left my husband and my community and all that was safe and familiar and moved back to Texas to support my family. And that was the beginning of me really learning what emotional freedom really meant. And that's kind of what I bring to people. And I just ended up in some circumstances in which everything that I counted on to make me safe and healthy disappeared. And because of my new training that I have done, I was able to navigate it pretty successfully without a lot of drama and trauma. And so I learned what I have learned as a mental fitness coach and about emotional freedom is what I am called to share with other people. And I found that through my training as a coach and as a positive intelligence coach. And I'm so ecstatic to be able to share it with the world because it just lights me up.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you were sharing in the workshop, you were talking about the difference between the judge and the sage, and how when you mentioned about the sage, I think I may have written, the sage perspective is that every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift or an opportunity. And I thought that was a really interesting point, because you mentioned at the beginning of your workshop with the members as well, that cancer was really that catalyst as a reset. So, but in a good way, wasn't it, with the different approaches you've taken?
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I thought that was quite interesting how that became the change. And when we talked about mindset and the difference between the sage and the judge, I've also put here that, and hopefully you're able to elaborate a little bit more, but you mentioned how in the situation, it's really fine-tuning our mindset and looking at how we take in these different examples and situations, because you mentioned here that the judge is a liar about 99% of the time. And I loved how you said it has a team of accomplices, and there's like 10 saboteurs that can happen. So it's literally, are we going to quieten down that judge and the saboteurs? And are we going to develop more of that sage perspective, or which way do we want to take it? Which I thought was really interesting. Is there any chance of elaborating on that for the listeners?
Absolutely. And as you said so well right here, what most of us live in and what blocks us from being fully successful and self-actualized is the reptilian part of the brain that is designed to protect us. And that's what we're calling the judge in this context. And through no ill intentions or anything like that, the judge is always looking out for us to protect us. That's part of its reptilian brain function. And so what happens is we're born with some of these saboteur patterns and ways that we self-sabotage ourselves. Others are created through life, especially during childhood experiences and stuff. But we come to be adults carrying around a whole bunch of baggage in the background that we don't even know about. And I'll use my avoider saboteur as an example. I've been self-employed for 20 years, and for a significant part of that, I have avoided dealing with getting clients. I had trouble avoiding asking for what money I was worth. I avoided circumstances that would make me uncomfortable or not feel good. And now that I'm more aware of that, I can see how much that has cost me in my life, and how much of my life was being run by voices and perceptions that I was totally unaware of. And for a lot of us, it works that way. You know, we think that when we're not thinking, you know, we're fairly neutral. But if you find yourself not thinking and you tune in a little bit, you'll often find that there's a voice running in the background of something that isn't really that positive. And so the reason that this is so important to us as human beings is because if we don't know what's happening to block us or to shut us down, we can't fight an enemy that we don't know. And if it's our normal, I mean, our brains have made it our normal. Again, no malicious intent. We're not bad people. We're not failing at being emotionally healthy or anything like that. We have no control over it when it happens. Where our control comes in is when we become aware of it. And then, as with all changes that people make, then we're able to evaluate, make choices, try things, and do something different. And the judge in the background, but no, you can't do something different. That's dangerous. Even if what you're already doing is like killing you, they still want you to stay. But it's the dichotomy of the unknown part of it that creates so much stress and anxiety and frustration and sadness and depression. And it's not self-inflicted from a standpoint of we're setting out to hurt ourselves, because it comes from the protection mechanism. But no matter where it comes from, it is blocking us in so many ways. And I think I'm elaborating a little too much here, maybe, but yeah, it's the concept that the voice in your head is a liar is a pretty radical concept. But when you think about the fact that all the things that we worry about, and really 99.9% of the time, they never happen. The rest of the stuff is lies. And we just don't see it like that, because it's the comfortable, familiar voice in our head that's keeping us safe. And so when we shift and become aware, and then we can start to actually shift that automatic brain response, which is what mental fitness coaching does, we gain a whole new level of awareness and freedom and ability to operate effectively in the world that we've never known, that we never even knew was possible. And that's my
suppose it's wonderful, because it's really what our neural pathways have conditioned over the time. So we're these electricians that have hardwired it a certain way, but we can actually change it. And I often will say to people how it's just comfortable sometimes doing what you may have been raised with, those belief systems or those cultural behaviors, and it's only over time that if you allow yourself for that personal growth and development that you start to see the changes, don't you? And I thought what I often will share with people is we have an automatic way of like how we cross our arms or how we do our shoelaces up and that sort of thing. But even if people are listening now, if you just cross your arms how you naturally do, but then uncross them and try and cross them the other way round, it just feels weird, doesn't it? Or a bit awkward or uncomfortable. Yeah. And yet, if you continue to do that different way over time, it then starts to become a bit more comfortable and a bit more normal. And I'm sure you'd agree, Paula, that that's the similar thing when we change our mindset, or we change the belief systems we had for a while. It can feel really uncomfortable, and there can be guilt and thinking that it's overindulgent to be spending time maybe on self-development and growth. Mm-hmm. But as time goes on, a bit like changing the way you cross your arms, it will just start to become a little bit more normal, you know. I mentioned, I mentioned that because one of the things you brought out here is that, you know, those sort of belief systems is that people will often say, I'll be happy when and then there was a blank, and it's literally they've got to look to the future to find that, instead of being comfortable in their own skin now and living now.
Yeah, that is so true, Heidi. And that mindset is everything. And the way that we operate and we believe the stories it's by rote. It really is. But when the mindset starts to shift, it immediately begins to lower the stress level, the background noise, the automatic default into what's going to happen that's wrong. And over time, as you build your muscles and those muscles literally shift, you do reach a point where the automatic response can become much more positive. And I shared in the workshop that one of the techniques that we use is the belief that in the sage perspective, that everything is a gift and an opportunity. And, you know, in a way that seems like crazy talk, but it really does. If we don't know that what am I trying to say here? If we continue to live in a mindset where we operate by rote, we have lost everything. And when we move into the mindset of I'm in charge, I'm responsible, and I have power, I have the power to make my own choices and manage my own emotions in my own life, everything changes. And the freedom and the peace and the knowledge that we gain is, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm having a hard time saying anything right now.
But would you say, Paula, it's almost like the experiences that we have are really like life lessons, really, And from those life lessons, would you think also how we developed new skills? So we were talking in the workshop about that life lesson of something that's been pretty hard, but we switch it around to go, right, what have I learned from this? And it could be that we've become more empathetic to ourselves, more empathetic to others, less judgmental to others as well as ourselves, less of that black and white, and understanding that there's a lot of other things that can be happening. And those only come through those lived experiences, which at the time I've often said is the most nauseating expression of character building, but it really is character building. At the time it doesn't feel it, but it's actually a gift to the point that you can use it in the future for yourself and also to support and serve others too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is really important, because when you do choose to recognize that, hey, there might be a gift in here, even if you don't know what the gift is, at that moment, you have started to reprogram the neural pathway. And it's that deep. And so what I have seen happen is that as time has gone by, and it is a progressive process, as your muscle, just like in a gym, is your muscles get stronger. And the same with this is, the more you are aware of when you're sabotaging yourself and when you recognize it and shift it, your mental fitness muscles get bigger too. And as time goes by and you build the muscle and it gets bigger and bigger, you get triggered less by things that were quote unquote bad. If you do get triggered, you get over it a lot quicker. And ultimately your brain does start to default. For me, the first time that I actually was in the midst of something that I was catastrophizing, and before I could even think of finding a gift, my brain popped in and gave me the gift. That was really life-changing for me, because that was a sure sign that the neural pathways had shifted and that I was on the well underway to having the muscles to be happy most of the time. And I remember when I started waking up happy, for a long time after my chaos-inducing life change in 2020, I mean, I would wake up at 4 a.m. in a dead panic a lot. But as time went by and I got more adept at, wait, this isn't really a disaster. That's a lie. There's something in here that I can use. All the fear and anxiety went away. People who were in my groups, as soon as the third week of working with mental fitness, they noticed that they're going like, oh my God, all the frazzled feelings are gone. I'm not so emotional. I'm calm. It's freaky. People are like, who are you? And why are you so calm? We're not used to seeing you like that. And, I think everybody needs that. We all deserve to have peace of mind. And peace of mind has been hard to find for the last few years, especially because our world has changed so dramatically. And I feel really fortunate and grateful to have the skills that I do, because truthfully, had COVID hit before I had the skills that I have now, I probably would be curled up in a little ball whining, it's cute, and stay there. Because certainly my life before cancer and before learning how to manage my emotions effectively, as I said, it looked really good on the outside, but on the inside, I was not a happy person. And I truly believe that a lot of the stress and the anxiety that I created for myself, with the help of my judge saboteur, who was trying to do a good thing for me, contributed to me getting sick. And that's a personal opinion. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you that that's what happened, but that's what I believe personally.
And yet it's interesting, isn't it? Because we know that emotion is like energy in motion, as it were, really. So, and it can go either way. And so the narrative can really change our physiology as well, because there's a lot of research and science showing that now. But what I thought was quite interesting when you were just mentioning that, and it took me back to the workshop, and I've got the note here, is how, because of the different emotions that we can have, either that negative focus or we can shift it to the positive, there are different regions of our brain, isn't there, that are being operated on. And I made the note here from what you mentioned, is that staying negative, it hurts the ability to clearly respond with empathy, curiosity, creativity, or that laser focused action, which I thought was great, because that's something that a lot of people know from previous podcasts that I mentioned, how and I mention it a lot in the membership, is how it's so important to create that curiosity, because when we use that curiosity, we're using the prefrontal cortex. So it's that executive functioning, you know, it's the emotional intelligence all comes from there. And it quietens down that reactive instinctiveness. So that curiosity means that instead of us judging ourselves or others, we're just asking more questions. And when we ask those questions, it allows us to then get creativity and notice things and be a little bit more open-minded, understanding that people can have different views and we might not agree with them, but we can still have a healthy building conversation with them, really, and discussion.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about empathy, because that is something that, you know, emotional freedom involves, is empathy for yourself, you know, because we are our own worst enemies and beating ourselves up, especially women like me. and then it's also just being able to choose to be intentional about accessing that part of the brain and creating from there. It just makes everything so much easier. And like you said, it just opens up all these creative possibilities. And what I have found is that using what in mental fitness is called the sage power, starting with empathy, is that it makes life so much easier, because you can see the big picture. You're not wrapped up in only what's happening now. You can step back and say, no, who am I? What do I stand for? Where do I want this to go? And evaluate your options and your decisions from that perspective, instead of the perspective of the reptilian brain, which is, how do I keep me safe? How do I stay safe? How do I stay safe? And safety does not create growth. Unfortunately, it just doesn't. And so, yeah, the tools that I have found to be really valuable. The first one is that bigger perspective, where you can actually stand back and look not only at the map of what is happening, but the energetic implications. One of my favorite tools is when I'm in the midst of a saboteur hijack and I'm just convinced the world is ending, is to imagine myself at 80, 90 years old as a healthy, happy, wise person. And I ask myself, you know, from here, when I look back at this, what's important about this? Most of the time, the answer is nothing. Sometimes it is, but it really helps you let go of that automatic default into, I have to do this, you know, that controlling kind of energy that really doesn't serve us at all and creates a lot of stress and our headaches and our stomach issues and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the empathy for others, so you can see their perspective, you can open up and get their input. And when two or three people start brainstorming together without the naysaying judge going, that won't work, that's a stupid idea, you just let it go and flow, you are so much more likely to come up with something wonderful and innovative and powerful that you would never have thought of before. So you get to innovate. And then once you've explored all those things, you can really take laser focused action, because you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish and what you're going to do. And you've identified your steps without all the naysaying voices. And I have found things that used to take me quite a lot of time to do, when I come into it through that process, you just go like that. And again, there's a lot of emotional freedom in not having to stress over getting things done, you know, and I think all of us can relate to that. There's also a component that comes in with your ability to stand up for yourself and recognize when you're making choices that don't help you. I used to be the queen of yes. Automatic yes. You want me to do something? Sure. And I shared in the workshop, but I finally realized after a couple of years after my cancer experience, when I was a volunteer leading a team of volunteers, and I was waking up in the middle of the night crying because it was so frustrating. So there I was, a human being who had a choice, who was literally choosing to ongoingly engage in things over an extended period that wake her up at 4 a.m. crying. You know, that's not right. We have the right to make the choices, to say no, to set our boundaries and live our lives and learn our lessons and give other people the same freedom to do that. And we can't have that freedom when we're all worried about what's going to happen, or we're judging everything that's happening in the world. Judgment is an insidious, dangerous energy sucker that creates a lot of emotional distress. or certainly it has in my life. And it feels really good to be in a place where it doesn't.
It does. And I just wanted to mention, Paula, because if people are listening to this and they feel that they're really quite low and the self-sabotaging narrative is very strong in them, it's just to encourage them, just those little micro habits, those little things just to start to change, because these things didn't happen overnight. It's taken decades. It could be a cultural thing where it's been an intergenerational pattern. So it's really, if you just take one little thing and you can just work on that for that day, and then just see that when you look back over time, that you've actually just started to change your mindset. And the reality is that we all have good and bad days, don't we? So some days or some weeks we might be sleeping really well, eating no sugar, moving our body really well, and just feel good. And then something may happen, and then we might be eating more sugar, not sleeping so well, not moving our body. And all of those factors then can play into our emotional well-being and our mindset. And then you can see how sometimes those little default things come back in. Yes. But for you just to identify that is really powerful, isn't it? Because that's that somatic awareness. And then right, well, let's just recalibrate today. Let's start again. Or you might need a good sleep and then start the following day. But it's just that we're all work in progress, aren't we, really? Paul, I'm sure you'd agree with that.
We absolutely are. And yeah, and that's so true, what you said. It really is. It's and what I love about it is at that moment that you just described, and where you say, okay, wow, I'm realizing that I'm triggered, or emotionally this doesn't feel good. And you choose to not keep going into it, but to step back. As you know, you're literally reprogramming the neural pathways in your brain and creating more emotional freedom for yourself.
And that kind of ties in with something you mentioned in the workshop, was the 3 gifts. Because even if you're in the early stages of wanting to shift your mindset, you are already bringing in those 3 gifts, because the 3 gifts that Paula mentioned was knowledge, power, and inspiration. So if you're noticing and you're aware that you're thinking, I'm going back into a bit of a default, you're already bringing in the gift of then power to go, actually, I've got the control here, and I can then change the situation, or I can say to myself, no, that's actually the judge telling me, whereas Paula said 99.9% of the time it's inaccurate, and we can preempt situations and they never actually happen. And then we can then feel from something that we've done or the way we've responded to a situation, we can almost feel inspired, can't we, by that
people
third
say
gift.
Empowerment. I mean, my client, it's like, how does that feel to do that? It's empowering. Yeah. Hey, I like that. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and I remember a school teacher said years ago, an English teacher, when I was at high school, we were all talking about fear and anxiety, and she was a very somatic teacher. It was really interesting listening to her. She'd talk a lot about emotions a lot, and she actually once said about worrying and getting being overly concerned with future situations that may never actually happen. And she just said, don't meet trouble halfway. And I remember saying that, and of course at the time it doesn't really mean a lot to you, when you're young, but as the time goes on, that little statement has always come back into my mind. And it's so true. Don't meet trouble halfway. It may never actually happen, but you can just create so many stories and ideas and imaginations in your head that it changes your perspective of how you're reading a situation or having a conversation with someone, really, can't you? Because it's really the stories in your head.
Yeah. That makes me think about something that happens with me sometimes and a lot of my clients. And, let's say you've reached out to somebody and you're expecting them to get back to you soon, and they don't. And you start making the first thing in my mind, okay, what did I do to piss them off? Or what did I do? What did I do to offend them, that somehow I've done something wrong? And then it kind of goes to, well, maybe they just don't need me, or whatever. And then that's like, oh well, yeah, if I wanted to and then finally 7 days later they call and say, oh my God, I broke my leg, I've been in the hospital, and I'm so sorry I didn't get in touch with you. So all that's negative stuff that you told yourself was happening, it's not true. Most of it is not true. Truthfully, other people don't think about us near as much as we think they do. That's something that I've definitely learned. And I liked what you shared. And that made me think of one of the things that I have really been embracing over the last few years is that, life is my friend. It's not my enemy. But because of my particular saboteur makeup, especially with having a strong victim saboteur, I mean, when I went deeper into it, turns out my brain was telling myself that I was a victim 90% of the time, and there was nothing happening. It was just making up stuff. And when I finally realized it, I was just like, what? And then when I realized how pervasive it had been, it was horrifying. But it's not that way anymore because, like you said, I have now the knowledge of what it is. I've taken the power back for myself, and it's inspired me to keep going because it feels so good.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It's absolutely fantastic. Now, Paula, you were sharing with us in the membership, in the workshop, a bit about an event that you've got happening soon. Did you want to share a little bit more about that, and also other ways that people can contact you? Because I will make sure that all the contact points are in the show notes.
Sure, I would be happy to. One of the first things that I like to invite people to do with me, because it's a really good way to get started, is there is a saboteur assessment through Positive Intelligence, who I am trained in, that you can do. It takes less than 5 minutes, and it will identify which of these 9 saboteurs that we've been talking about, which ones are your top ones. Like, for example, I think I've mentioned that avoider is one of my top ones, victim is one of my top ones, and I'll just throw in so you know that pleaser is also one of my top saboteurs. And just knowing that has just opened up so many ways for me to be smarter about the choices that I make. So I invite you to take the assessment. The link will be in the show notes. And then I'm offering a no cost, no obligation 45-minute consult. And we will actually look at what would make you feel like you had emotional freedom. Then we would look at how your saboteurs are blocking you. And then we'll create a strategy for you to actually start using the tools and move forward with shifting that muscle and bringing you down. So anybody who's interested, I invite you to do that. I'm also going to do a deep dive workshop to deepen what the workshop that we just did together. And it is 3 ways to have emotional freedom now. And that's going to be on, I believe, November 11th. Again, it's in the box. And if you're interested in that, you'll find ways that you can either sign up or, again, call me, schedule something with me. We'll have a chat. I'll give you the details. And my most impactful offering is an 8-week mental fitness mentor course. And that is where you actually build the muscle that you need to begin actively experiencing the benefits of mental fitness. And I have several of those options starting in January. The first one is on January 23rd, 2023. So the best thing to do would be to reach out to me and let's chat. And then we can move you into whatever is best for you based on where you are, what's sabotaging you, and what you really, really want for your life.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Paula. And because if somebody's listening or watching this podcast after January 2023, we'll make sure that within the show notes that they can either
go to my
subscribe.
website, which is what'snextformylife.com. That will be in the show notes as well. And you'll find the details on whatever, because yes, I have them, you probably start them every other month. And sometimes I will have more than one group going on at the same time because the groups are limited to 6 people each. So rather than putting 12 people into one group, I run them separately so everybody can get the individual attention that they need.
That's nice. Quite nice and intimate as well, isn't it? And you can really take your
focus.
focus. Yeah, that's great.
More likely to be successful if you approach change as part of a small intimate group as opposed to trying to do it yourself. So it's totally worth it, and it feels so much better to be surrounded with people who get you and can make you see that you're being really hard on yourself and that you don't need to be.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again, Paula, and thank you for spending time with the members as well within the membership. It's been lovely. And yes, everybody, check out Paula's links in the show notes, because what she covered within the workshop was just priceless. And I only mentioned a few of the gems, but there's so much more there to share. So I just want a big thank you again. And thank you also to every listener and viewer that have been watching us today. We really appreciate you taking that time out and taking away some of those gems from Paula's comments as well. So until next time, all my love and best wishes. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and also forward this on to somebody you know will benefit. To learn more about pain relief, plus how to improve your health and well-being, go to totalsomatics.com. Until next time, take care.